Before we basically talk about the story slicing, I think we can start with a simple idea. What is the difference between a story and a requirement from your standpoint?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. This is a very important point, and it has been used interchangeably in this agile community, even now for a long time. So most of the places when I go and I tell them like, please do not use the word requirement and use the word story. So people say like, hey, what's the difference? Ultimately, what basically you're getting is some business needs, right? So call it a requirement, call it a story. How does it matter? So the words matter. Words are actions. The way you use the word in a place, in the workplace or outside, that really makes a difference. So words are not just words. Words are actions, right? So when you talk about the requirement, the first thing that comes to my mind is something is static, something that has been given, and that you have to go and do it. So that is the requirement, that it is the business requires you to do this. That's why it's called requirement. And that's how the entire world of, the classical methodology worked. Some requirement came from the top and it was given and you just go and implement it. So the word requirement in your mindset, in our mindset, comes with the notion that this is something to be done. It is not something to be developed, even though it develops to some extent. The story has a very different connotation. Just like a grandma's story, the story starts, or if you're watching the soap opera, you can see how the story evolves. The first, they see the whole serial for like 10 episodes and gradually it becomes 200 episodes, right? And especially if you see that Ekta Kapoor serial, it goes on and on and on, right? And that is called a story. Story evolves. The story evolves in the sense like it starts somewhere, then you keep adding, and then gradually it evolves to an extent that you can say like, okay, now my story finishes. And you can add more to that, right? So a story has a life. And the life begins with the person who conceives like this is the problem of a customer and let's go and solve it. And they start with a placeholder. So many a time, the definition of the story they give is a placeholder to start discussion. So once you start a discussion, you do not go and solutionize right away. You work with the team, you understand it, then you come out with different solutions, then you create an hypothesis, and then you start solving one by one. And the story is not complete until it's done in the sprint and it's delivered to the customer. So the story has a whole life cycle, right? It's not a requirement cut and dried, like that's exactly what you have to do and just deliver. It is something that you keep overlapping with the business, with the customer, and keep learning and learning until it is actually delivered to the customer. So that's the fundamental difference between a story and so it also changes your mindset, the way you look at it. And that's the reason I always insist on people to use the word story versus requirement.
So actually, when I think about uh, agile, then it just generally comes up with the idea of the collaboration and working together, and immediately the idea of conversation comes up. So I generally feel that story comes with the idea of having the conversation. So as long as I mean as long as whatever you're trying to have, you may be having the story, your idea in Jira, or you are having different format
Mhm.
using it. But if you're not having the conversation around it, then it's not a story anyways. That,
Exactly. If the whole idea behind the story is start talking, start
absolutely.
talking, because last time in my video I mentioned one thing. We have entered a world which is called social. Social, a very important part of it. Social media, social. So this story creates that social thing that you have the opportunity to tell a story, and a story is also a very nice way of communicating ideas, right?
Mhm.
If you want to communicate some idea, if you tell in the story form, for example, whatever I'm saying, if I tell you the story behind it, like why I did it, then you will relate to the story more, relate to the real thing more. And there's a word that goes around that says like, words make you think, stories make you link. So
Yeah.
when you stories, then it link the people together, right? And that's the whole idea behind the stories.